As we enter July, things are really starting to heat up across the Atlantic. What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. All right, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have quite a bit to discuss with you today. As first of all, happy 1st of July. It's we are now in a new month, and with that, when that means we're going to be looking at long-term stuff for hurricane season. We are looking at the satellite imagery right now, kind of looking at more and more of these tropical waves coming off the Sahel region over here in Africa and moving into the tropics. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the conditions and what we might be expecting throughout the Atlantic across the month of July. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right here. So starting off, we're actually going to pull up some model runs real quickly because there is an interesting shift that I am noticing a bit with this right here. I'm noticing more and more, at least according to the European, low-pressure systems kind of emerging off the coast of the United States and moving into the Atlantic. And the European, both on the operational and the ensembles, I've been kind of tagging this as maybe some sort of tropical development. And we'll go ahead and get started with the ensembles because I do want to go ahead and get get going right here, because here's what we got for the European right here. The reason I'm bringing up this whole thing up is just to kind of give a gauge as to what they're showing, and then kind of take a look at how realistic it is and what might be coming from that. So let's go ahead and get started, ladies and gentlemen. This is for parts of the Atlantic over here, the subtropical Atlantic region over here in the Atlantic off the east coast of the United States. So what you got going on here, you have a low pressure system. At least one of them starts to kind of pop up on the ensemble 6 days out. And then as we go ahead and start moving forward, what's the next 12 hours looking like? That one system remaining there for the most part. And then as we go ahead and move on to around July 8th, we start seeing a couple more scenarios starting to pop up over here off the subtropical Atlantic. This is going to be an interesting situation because this is hugging right around the tropic to subtropic boundary that I'm noticing right here. We're going to want to to keep a close eye on that and see how things progress in the future. But as we get into the night of July 8th over here, definitely noticing more of these ensembles popping up. You're noticing a couple more over here as well, and more so in the Atlantic basin than we are over here in more so the subtropical Atlantic, that kind of boundary region. And then as we get to 9 days out, things really start to ramp up over here across, at least according to the European, as you start seeing more ensembles coming off the United States, and you start seeing the existing ones moving further to the east, potentially strengthening as well. So we're going to want to watch out for that. And then as we get to 10 days out, you're noticing a lot more of these ensembles coming off have come off the coast of Virginia, North Carolina, moving into a lot of the water temperatures over here. Things are definitely cooking up over here according to the European run right here. At least for what I'm seeing with weather nerds, things do seem to be starting to ramp up over here, at least in parts of the subtropical Atlantic. My main question with this here, according to this, is this going to be tropical, or is this going to be something else that comes off the coast, off the United States? So with that, let's go ahead and shift over to our operational. Here is the European operational for you guys right here. So taking a quick gander at things, you have our low pressure system currently over here that was tagged by the NHC. Not really going to do too much over here. That's pretty much good and gone, although some convection is possible for parts of Florida and Georgia near the tail end of it. We're going to want to watch out for that. But ultimately, what we want to see is, okay, we're starting to see, okay, where are these low-pressure systems over here in the United States emerging from, and when are they going to cross into the Atlantic, and how are we going to start progressing from here? So you start seeing our first one moving off the coast of Virginia and North Carolina starting around July 7th or so. You start seeing this pulling up right here. System tries to do its best to organize and consolidate into a weak low pressure system before moving out into the Atlantic either as a tropical or subtropical storm right here. My main question is, okay, I'm looking at this right here, but but is this going to be a frontal system or is this going to be a tropical system? Because the difference between the two is tropical systems do not use fronts. They are not attached by fronts at all, because they are warm chord systems. Mid-latitude cyclones are cold chord systems. They rely on fronts, they rely on baroclinic forcing, which is why you see them intensify over land and why you see those cold fronts and warm fronts you typically see during severe weather outbreaks. But ultimately, you have this system moving off the coast over here. You're going to want to pay attention to it over here. It does kind of get a little bit close to Bermuda over here before moving out to sea, but it does remain relatively weak. It does appear, from what I'm seeing, to maybe be detached from a front, but we'll have to see how this pans out. And then you have another system coming right off. It's actually a lot stronger by the time we get to July 10th. That comes off the coast of New Jersey and then moves into the subtropical Atlantic over here. It does get to about 1,000 millibars, but this to me looks like it's not necessarily tropical. This looks to me like it's a cold chord mid-latitude cyclone. From what I'm seeing, I'm basically telling based on the fact that you have your height gradient right here. It's kind of moving into from pretty much from pretty much the similar style of a front would. You're looking at your 576 height line that moves into parts of the the cyclone over here, and then it kind of moves off over a bit further to the north. That kind of illustrates kind of a general idea of where your warm and cold fronts are. If this was a warm and cold fronts, yeah. If this was a tropical cyclone, you wouldn't see those lines attaching to the tropical cyclone itself. Instead, what you would typically see with this is you would see kind of the heights kind of stay away from it and allow for the system to kind of act in its own accord and take advantage of those warm waters and all of that. But you're not typically seeing that, and it does to me look like, at least for that one, it's more so a mid-latitude cyclone that moves over. Then you have a couple other ones. You have these two right here that you're not seeing necessarily attached to these height lines over here. They're kind of by themselves right here. They're not this to me looks a bit more tropical than mid-latitude, but by the time we get to that is July 15th, and at that current point in time, ladies and gentlemen, you're just going to want to pay attention to it, and we'll have to keep an eye on it. It's so far out that right now just things are subject to change right here, but it does appear to me that at least in the next couple of weeks, at least the northern tropics and the southern subtropics of the Atlantic off the east coast of the United States could be seeing some areas of at least a potential development over there. I'm not necessarily saying that it's going to happen 100%. No, I'm not doing that. Just the thing, I just know there's a lot of low pressure systems over there, and it's going to be moving through pretty decent conditions. At least some of them are for some sort of development, but we'll have to keep you updated on that. We'll keep an eye on it as we start shifting over to the rest of our conditions to kind of give an idea as to, okay, we're seeing all this stuff starting to come up. Maybe some of it is tropical, maybe some of it's not, but what do the conditions look like, and how can we take an educated guess of what will be happening going forward? Starting off, here is our water temperatures, ladies and gentlemen. Look at this. This is for July 1st. We're just going to do a quick analysis of everywhere in the Atlantic right here. But we'll also hone in on the subtropical Atlantic as well, because things are definitely getting interesting over there. Where that mid-latitude cyclone comes off, it emerges into very cool waters. I'd say about 20 degrees Celsius. That's not nearly enough for tropical development on its own. And then as it starts to move further to the south, it moves into about 23 or 24 degrees Celsius, which is about 73 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit for those who do not use the metric system. You're not quite there in terms of tropical development. I know at least according to the common consensus, the magic number is 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 27 degrees Celsius. But I have seen systems in the past develop in cooler waters. I'd say like in my opinion, based on my experience for examples like Hurricane Dawn back in 2023, I'd say anything over 25 degrees Celsius is like in theory good for tropical development. Am I saying that everything's going to develop in 25 degrees Celsius waters? No. You need a lot of the thermodynamics to also go right with that as well, but at least the theoretical minimum is about 77 degrees instead of 80 degrees. 80 degrees is the start of that sweet spot from what I've seen based on past experience and based on other research I have taken a look at. But 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 27 Celsius, is that sweet spot you start to get into, and those water temperatures are mainly concentrated in the tropical Atlantic. You do have some exceptions with it starting to bleed in a little bit into the subtropics, but it's mainly concentrated around that 30 to 32 degree north meridian, not meridian, but that parallel right there. And you can definitely see that gradient taking shape from about 28 degrees Celsius to about 26 in the span of a couple of 100 miles. That's a pretty significant drop for that region. It really starts to kind of go down as you move further up to the north. By the time you get to about 35 degrees north, you're looking at 25, 24 degrees Celsius in that region. So if anything wants to develop in that, it would have to do it below, I'd say, about 32 degrees north in terms of latitude. And at least according to the Europeans, some of those low-pressure systems do move into those warmer waters that may allow for that to happen. But we'll have to wait and see how things will progress, especially as some of these are so far out in the models that things are subject to change. But at least in theory, the water temperatures are definitely good, with the exception of the systems further up to the north. But overall, across the Atlantic, things have really heated up over the last little while. Look at the Gulf region right here, ladies and gentlemen. 30 to 31 degrees Celsius across much of the Gulf Coast, from Texas to Florida to the Florida Keys to the Bahamas as well. Things are really starting to ramp up in their water temperatures over there. And a primary reason for this surge, especially over the last few days, is because you have that high pressure system blocking pressure system blocking system, and causing that heat dome across much of the eastern United States. That's affecting 250 million people. And where I'm at, it's going to be 98 degrees today as a high temperature, not to mention the humidity and the heat index, which could be 110, 115 easily in my area. But overall, ladies and gentlemen, that high pressure system is not only causing the continental United States to get warm, but it's also really starting to heat up the water temperatures in the Gulf region and in the southwestern Atlantic. Matter of fact, take a look at what we're seeing with the Gulf Stream. All right, here we're looking at 29 degrees Celsius all the way up to North Carolina now, which is a pretty serious concern right there, at least down the line in the season. But overall, things are really heating up. You're starting to see 29 degrees Celsius water temperatures across much of the region over here as well in off the coast of the Bahamas, more so in this tropical Atlantic basin. And then looking at the Caribbean as well, taking a quick gander, that's also starting to heat up as well. You're looking at 28 degrees Celsius generally across the eastern and central Caribbean, but 29 to 30 is really starting to heat up across much of the northwestern Caribbean, like near the Yucatan, near Cuba, near Central America, Jamaica. Those areas have also really started to ramp up in terms of their water temperatures. And then looking at the main development region, things are starting to heat up even more as well. Let's go ahead and show you another map of taking a look at it. Here is what we have for the main development region: 29 degrees Celsius water temperatures, at least as of the last 24 hours, are becoming present off the coast of Africa and more so around the intertropical convergence zone. That's something you're going to want to pay attention to. You're looking at 26 degrees Celsius waters going all the way up to the Cabo Verde Islands as well. They're starting to see those water temperatures increase, and you're also noticing this big bulk of 26 plus degree water temperatures really starting to surge and really starting to move further and further and further to the east right here, kind of bridging that gap between the cooler waters of the eastern Atlantic and the warmer waters in the deep tropics. That's really been pushing over, I'd say, a good 200 to 300 miles in the last month or so alone. That is going to continue throughout July, and that is likely going to continue throughout most of August as well, because even though this is just the first month of hurricane season, we haven't seen too much just yet. Things are really starting to cook up quite a bit, and even if we don't see that many powerful systems in 2026 because of the El Nino, that raises the concern for me for 2027 as well. And the reason it raises the concern is because all these waters in the main development region, all these waters in the Caribbean, and especially that ocean heat content. Matter of fact, let's pull up the map for you. Especially this ocean heat content is going to kind of stay tapped. It's going to stay intact, and it's going to be untapped. We saw this in 2023. We had 20 named storms, but none of them got into the Caribbean with the exception of Hurricane Idalia, which formed off the Central American Gyre. What you saw after that was a lot of that ocean heat content stayed untapped. It stayed untapped during the winter, and when spring came around, it really started to boil up. And next thing you know, we had Hurricane Beryl, we had Hurricane Helene move through the central, not through central, but rather through the wet northwestern Caribbean Sea as well, forming off the Central American Gyre. You also had Milton as well, that was mostly in the Gulf, but at that point, but still. And speaking of ocean heat content, here's where we were at a month ago. Things were not looking that great in comparison. You didn't have as much OHC in the loop current in the Gulf and the Caribbean. It was about 100 to 125 OHC, and it was a lot further to the south in the MDR and the Atlantic Basin. It mainly stayed concentrated in the deep tropics and the MDR. Here's where we are a month later. Boom, more OHC everywhere, folks. The Gulf Stream has really started to move further up to the north. You're looking at the northwestern Caribbean over here really starting to heat up too. You're looking at 150 OHC across a lot of these regions as well. The MDR, a lot of that OHC is shifting further and further up to the north. Not near the Cabo Verde Islands just yet, but it is starting to shift in that direction, and the intertropical convergence zone is taking notice as that's also shifting further up to the north. So we'll have to take this kind of seriously. We'll have to pay close attention, especially for July. I would say July especially, we are going to need to watch how these water temperatures are going to surge, and we're especially going to need to watch how the wind shear reacts as well, because here's what we got for your wind shear. So let's go ahead and pull this up for you guys right here. Here is your wind shear map for you guys. Let's go ahead and take a quick gander at this. Here's what we got. Subtropics, there is kind of, you have that trough and ridge pattern that's kind of building up over here across much of the North America and moving into Europe as well. They're also dealing with a heat wave as well. So that's something to note for sure as well. But then as time continues to go on, you're looking at the deep tropics, remains relatively sheary across much of the Caribbean and main development region, although the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic Basin remains a bit of a wild card for a little while. And then as we get to the 4th of July over here, you have this situation where a lot of the shear in much of the Atlantic over here, north of the main development region and in the Atlantic Basin, pretty much weakens pretty considerably, actually. And if we do see some tropical development, and if it takes advantage of this low shear in that region, like some of the models are forecasting, then you're gonna this will have an easier time. That said, you do have a trough digging into parts of the subtropical Atlantic by July 7th. Meanwhile, in the main development region, you're seeing a very big split in this huge bulky shear. A lot of it's moving further up to the north into Morocco, Algeria, and Iberia as well, and some of it's shifting towards the equator as well, but you have a pretty nice shear pocket that really starts to emerge by the time we get to the 10th and the 11th. It kind of remains clear and remains persistent by the time we get to the 12th. Things start to ramp up a bit in terms of the shear component over here by the time we get to the 13th, but the 14th and the 15th, ladies and gentlemen, across the main development region, by the time we get to mid-July, a lot of this wind shear starts to collapse. I don't know how consistent that is. I don't know if this is just one run, but at least according to what I'm seeing right now, by the time we get to mid-July, a lot of the wind shear here collapses. I don't know if this is temporary or not. I hope it's temporary, but things are starting to ramp up in terms there. And I would say by the time we get to the second week of July, we're going to need to take a much bigger look at what's going on in the Atlantic, not just in the subtropical Atlantic, but maybe the main development region as more of those tropical waves start to emerge and help moisten up the atmosphere over there. We'll keep you updated on everything here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel, but with that being said, we are going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. The next Triple P show will be on Sunday, July 5th at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. Join the Storms United Discord server if you'd like to be a part of it. The link to that will be in the end screen. We're going to have NASDA's weather. We've rescheduled for that time as well. And I'm hoping to invite David Schlotthauer once again. I think it'll be a good time. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.